An hour and a half. That's how long they made him wait, until the CEO walked in and changed everything. The glass doors of Quantum Credits Bank slid open, allowing a rush of cool, conditioned air to spill onto the sidewalk. The sharp scent of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint polish of leather furniture, creating an atmosphere of quiet efficiency. James Carter stepped inside, rolling his shoulders beneath his tailored blazer. He wasn't nervous. He had walked into enough boardrooms, signed enough deals, and built enough from the ground up to know he had earned his place in any room. He just needed them to see it. His meeting was set for 11 a.m. sharp. No reason to expect anything but professionalism. The bank's lobby was a careful blend of modern luxury and old-world wealth. Mahogany desks, sleek glass partitions, and gold accents that caught the light just enough to remind you that money lived here. It was a place designed to impress. The receptionist, a woman with a neatly pinned bun and an air of disinterest, glanced up as he approached. Her nameplate read Margaret. "Welcome to Quantum Credits Bank," she said, her voice clipped and automatic. "Do you have an appointment?" "James Carter," he replied, placing his leather portfolio on the counter. "I have a meeting with Linda Kramer at 11. Margaret tapped at her keyboard, eyes barely lifting to meet his. "You're on the schedule," she said, still neutral. "You can have a seat. She'll be with you soon." James nodded and stepped back toward the seating area. He chose a chair near the floor-to-ceiling windows, where sunlight slanted across the polished floors in crisp lines. A group of sharply dressed professionals stood nearby, chatting casually about market shifts and investment opportunities, the kind of easy talk people had when they belonged. His fingers drummed lightly against his briefcase. 10 a.m. He was early. He always was. The minutes ticked by, 11:05, 11:15. At first, he let it go. Banks weren't immune to delays. But after 20 minutes, he started watching more closely. A man in a gray suit, maybe early 30s, checked in with Margaret. Less than 5 minutes later, a young banker appeared and ushered him past the frosted glass doors to the executive offices. Then came a woman in a cream-colored blazer. No appointment, as far as James could tell. Just a casual, friendly exchange with Margaret before she too was led inside. His name remained uncalled. He checked his watch again. 11:30 a.m. Something was off. James's fingers tapped lightly against his briefcase. He watched people come and go. Some entered with the confidence of belonging. Easy smiles, familiar nods, handshakes with the staff. Others, like him, sat patiently waiting. The difference? They were being called. He wasn't. 35 minutes had passed. His appointment had been scheduled. He'd confirmed it twice. Yet here he sat, in the same chair, while at least 6 people had arrived after him and vanished through the frosted doors. Still, he remained composed. He had dealt with this kind of thing before, subtle, unspoken barriers. The kind people could easily deny. "Oh, we didn't mean to keep you waiting. Must have been a scheduling mix-up. So sorry about that. You know how busy we get." Excuses, wrapped in politeness. He stood, keeping his expression neutral, and walked back to the front desk. Margaret looked up with the same impassive gaze. "Excuse me," James said, calm but firm. "Has Linda Kramer been made aware that I'm waiting?" Margaret let out a short breath, like she'd been interrupted mid-thought. She tapped her keyboard without making eye contact. "She knows. She's just finishing up with another client." James waited for something more, a follow-up, some acknowledgement that she'd check again, maybe offer an updated time. But Margaret simply went back to typing. "Do you have an estimate on when she'll be available?" he asked, holding back his frustration. Margaret barely glanced at the screen before offering a shrug. "It shouldn't be much longer." James exhaled slowly, steadying himself. It wasn't just what she said. It was how she said it. No urgency. No real effort to check. Just another brushed-off response meant to pacify him. And then, right in front of him, he watched it happen again. A woman in a navy blue dress walked in, her designer handbag swinging at her side. She was mid-conversation on the phone, her voice light and effortless. Instantly, Margaret's posture shifted. Her tone softened. Her lips curved into something that actually resembled a real smile. "Good morning, Mrs. Lancaster," she said, voice lighter, more polished. The woman gave a polite nod and barely had to pause before a young banker appeared at her side, ushering her toward the back offices. No waiting. No questions. No being told soon. James let out a slow breath. He had been sitting there for almost an hour. She had been there for less than a minute. He turned back to Margaret. "So, do appointments matter here?" he asked, voice steady. "Or is it just first come, first served?" For the first time, she looked slightly uncomfortable. "I told you, sir, she'll be with you soon." There it was again, that word. Soon. A delay without a deadline. A promise without commitment. A word that let people pretend they weren't doing what they were clearly doing. James glanced at the frosted glass doors. It would be easy to let it go. Sit back down. Wait another 30 minutes. Pretend this wasn't happening. But this wasn't just about waiting. This was about something else entirely. He returned to his seat, forcing himself to stay calm. He had faced worse. He had built a company from the ground up. He had dealt with condescending investors, been underestimated in rooms full of men who thought they knew better. But this was different. This wasn't about his business plan or numbers on a spreadsheet. This was about being ignored, about being dismissed, as if he wasn't even worth an update. He checked his watch. 12:05 p.m. Over an hour. He took a slow breath and looked around the lobby again. No one else was waiting. Every single person who had walked in after him had been attended to, let inside, or at least acknowledged. Except him. Across the room, a young teller was speaking to an older man in khakis and a golf polo. Their conversation was easy, light, even cheerful. James tilted his head, listening. "Yeah, I told her to just walk in," the older man chuckled. "She doesn't even need an appointment. You know how it is." The teller laughed. "Well, for Mrs. Lancaster, we always make exceptions." James's grip tightened around the handle of his briefcase. So that was how it worked. Rules for some, different rules for others. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, eyes fixed on the polished floor. This was a test. Would he sit there quietly, accept being pushed aside, and wait for permission to be seen? Or would he make it clear that his time was just as valuable as anyone else's? He stood, not quickly, not aggressively, just decisively. He walked past the front desk, past Margaret's blank expression, and headed straight for the frosted glass doors. "Sir," Margaret started, but he didn't stop. He pushed open the door. Inside, a hallway stretched before him, lined with private offices. Some doors were open, others closed. But one thing was immediately clear. Linda Kramer was not in a meeting. She was sitting at her desk, typing on her laptop. Alone. She looked up, her expression shifting instantly from surprise to irritation. "Mr. Carter," she said, her voice clipped. "You should have waited to be called." James met her gaze evenly. "I did wait." Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, her lips pressing into a thin line. "Please, take a seat," she finally said. James sat, not because she had allowed him to, but because he chose to. But something told him this conversation wasn't going to go the way she thought it would. Linda's fingers twitched slightly as she adjusted the papers on her desk. Her face stayed neutral, but James saw it. The tension in her jaw, the flicker of irritation in her eyes. "I apologize for the delay," she said, forcing a smile. "We've been extremely busy today." Busy. James let the word hang in the air. He had watched at least 6 people be ushered in like VIPs while he sat in that lobby for over an hour and a half. "Were you?" he asked, his tone calm but firm. "Because I counted a few clients who didn't have to wait at all. Some without appointments." Linda's lips tightened again. "I assure you, Mr. Carter, that wasn't intentional. There must have been a miscommunication." "Right. A miscommunication." James exhaled through his nose, keeping his expression unreadable. "Interesting." Linda cleared her throat. clearly eager to shift the conversation. She flipped open a folder and began scanning its contents. "Now, let's discuss your loan application," she said, her voice regaining that polished, dismissive edge. "I've had a chance to review it, and while your finances are impressive, we do have strict criteria for approvals. Given the current lending climate, I'm afraid we'll need more assurances before we can proceed." She had barely finished her sentence when the door swung open. The energy in the room shifted instantly. What had been a quiet hallway moments ago was now filled with the low hum of voices, confident, commanding voices that carried weight. 3 men stepped inside, all in tailored suits, their presence unmistakably authoritative. James didn't need to guess who they were. These were the decision-makers, the executives whose approval actually mattered in a place like this. And at the front of them stood a familiar face, Richard Langford, CEO of Quantum Credits Bank, a man who very much knew who James Carter was. Richard's sharp eyes scanned the room before landing on James. His face lit up in recognition. "James," he said, breaking into a wide smile. "What the hell are you doing here?" Linda froze. James stood, shaking Richard's hand firmly. "Hey, Richard. Been a while." "It has." Richard clapped him on the shoulder, beaming. "You still running Carter Strategies?" "Still growing it." James replied smoothly, "Still growing." Linda stared between them, her fingers tightening around the folder in front of her. Her face had gone several shades paler. Richard's smile faded as he turned to her. "How long has James been waiting?" Silence. Linda opened her mouth, but no words came out. James didn't answer right away. He let the moment hang, let the weight of it settle over everyone in the room. "About an hour and a half," he said finally. Richard's expression didn't change in any dramatic way, but James noticed the subtle shift, the tightening of his jaw. "An hour and a half," Richard repeated, his tone deceptively light. "You had James Carter waiting for an hour and a half." Linda scrambled for words. There was a scheduling issue. Richard didn't even look at her. His eyes were still on James. "You should have called me directly," he said. "I would have made sure you were taken care of." James offered a small, knowing smile. "Didn't think I needed to." Richard exhaled, shaking his head. Then he turned to Linda. The warmth was gone from his voice. "Linda," he said, calm but final. "Step outside for a moment." Her hands were clenched into fists before she forced them to relax. "Of course," she said quickly, standing and exiting without another word. The moment the door clicked shut behind her, the room seemed to exhale. But the tension didn't leave. Richard turned back to James, shaking his head again as he sank into the chair across from him. The other 2 executives remained standing nearby, exchanging silent glances. "This isn't how we do things here," Richard said finally, his tone steady, clipped. James tilted his head slightly. "Seems like it is." Richard didn't respond right away. He let the statement sit in the air. He didn't argue, didn't make excuses, because men like him, men at the top, knew when something had gone wrong. And right now, Richard was calculating just how big of a problem this was. James Carter wasn't just another walk-in client. He had built a multi-million-dollar consulting firm from nothing. His reputation carried weight. People in business circles listened to him, trusted his word. And now? Now he had a story. Richard sat back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "Tell me what happened." James didn't sugarcoat it. He laid it all out, every moment. The appointment. The wait. Watching client after client walk in and get escorted past him. Margaret's cold indifference. Linda's dismissiveness. The way they treated him like he was just another name on a list. Richard didn't interrupt. The other 2 executives listened just as intently. When James finished, the silence stretched for a moment. Then Richard exhaled. "I appreciate you telling me," he said. "And I'll be honest, I'm pissed." James leaned back slightly. "Why?" Richard let out a short, humorless chuckle. "Because this is the kind of thing that wrecks reputations. We've worked too damn hard to build this institution's credibility, and now I have to clean up a mess I didn't even know existed." He turned to one of the executives. Make sure Linda is off the floor. Immediately. We'll have a conversation later. The man nodded and stepped out without another word. Richard turned back to James. That loan application you submitted, I assume it was solid. James tapped the briefcase beside him. See for yourself. Richard took the folder James handed over and flipped through it. He didn't need long. Barely a few pages in, and he was already shaking his head. This shouldn't have even been a question. He shot another glance at the remaining executive. Fast track it. I want an approval on my desk by the end of the day. James raised an eyebrow. Just like that. Richard met his gaze. You should have had it 2 hours ago. I'm fixing the mistake. James considered that. He knew this wasn't about generosity. It wasn't even really about making things right. This was about control. About damage control. About stopping the story here in this office before it bled into the circles Richard cared about. And James understood that game better than anyone. Still, he wasn't going to let Richard off that easy. I'll accept the approval, James said, standing. But fixing this for me doesn't fix the real issue. Richard's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. We'll be having a long conversation about that, he said. James nodded, grabbed his briefcase, and walked toward the door. But before he left, he turned and met Margaret's gaze one last time. She didn't look nearly as confident now. The summer heat hit James the moment he stepped outside. The bank's pristine exterior gleamed under the midday sun, polished and perfect. But inside, the cracks had already formed. Because this wasn't just about a loan. It wasn't even just about Linda. It was about something bigger, something that had played out in 1,000 different ways in 1,000 different places. It wasn't always loud. It wasn't always overt. But it was there. The assumption that some people belonged in those offices while others had to wait. The quiet dismissals. The polite rejections. The carefully constructed barriers. Barriers that could always be explained away. But not today. Today, someone had to face the consequences. And the next time Linda Kramer looked at a name on her appointment list, she'd think twice. James checked his phone. A new email. Loan approved. He smirked, tucking the phone into his pocket as he walked toward his car. Respect isn't given. It's demanded. And today he got what he came for.